In the past year, I've done everything in my power to alert people to the explosive potential of silver. I've pointed out all the evidence we have of a continuous manipulation in its price, explained the strange and unusual market structure of this precious metal, which lends itself to be manipulated, and warned that due to inflation, this manipulation is destined to end, leading to some spectacular gains. But that is perhaps not enough. As the saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and the public probably needs a visual representation to understand the magnitude of this move. I believe I've found a good way to illustrate the matter, and if you're watching this video, you'll be among the first to see it. A normal market usually moves in a straight line. It tends to ebb and flow in a repeating wave pattern, but it always reconnects with the baseline. This type of movement is easy to predict. Investors have plenty of time to consider their strategy and buy the dip whenever they believe that the correction is over and the price is sufficiently cheap. This kind of market can be quite boring, but it's also safe and reliable, and therefore most people feel comfortable investing in it. A second type of market we may encounter is the exponential one. It moves up and down an exponential curve. This is usually not an organic behavior, but the result of an artificial expansion of the money supply, which induces a speculative bubble. This kind of movement is often very exciting because it offers the potential for tremendous gains. But it is also very dangerous because it can end abruptly once the flow of newly printed money ends and the speculative fervor disappears overnight. When this market is in a decline, it is very difficult to say whether this is simply a correction in which the market reconnects with its exponential baseline or a complete collapse of the bubble. This is why most investors are struggling to invest in such a market. They usually jump on the bandwagon when the bubble is already in its final stages and goes absolutely parabolic, and they usually fail to recognize when it has popped and end up riding it all the way down. But there is a third and final way in which markets may move, which is very rare and completely counterintuitive. This market movement is called a step function, and it occurs when a market is repricing an asset almost instantaneously. This is of course not a normal market movement. It is the result of a prolonged price manipulation which is breaking down. The previous price was held in place by a central bank or some other financial institution through some kind of market intervention. But since the intervention requires too much effort to maintain, or is no longer perceived to be in the best interests of the central bank, it is suddenly abandoned. The asset reverts back to its natural market price in a sudden and unexpected move. The existence of step function movements is well documented, especially in the foreign exchange markets. For instance, the famous incident in 1992 in which George Soros broke the Bank of England and forced it to withdraw from a currency peg, which kept the pound sterling artificially strong compared to the German mark. If, like me, you believe that precious metals are money, it should not surprise you that similar pegs exist in order to keep the US dollar artificially strong compared to gold and silver, and that if they come under pressure, this could lead to an outsized move in their price. Trading this kind of market is almost impossible. The only way to benefit from it is by recognizing that the market is manipulated and positioning yourself accordingly prior to the breakdown of the manipulation. But this is very difficult to do because the price won't give you any indication that you're doing the right thing until the move is over and it's too late to do anything about it. In the case of George Soros and the Bank of England, his short position was large enough to break the manipulation in the pound sterling on its own. But none of us is rich enough to affect the silver market, and therefore all we can do is to position ourselves ahead of time and hope that we are reading this market correctly. And now that we've explained the nature of the move we are likely to see, let's visualize it in a way that everyone can understand. I'm basing this visualization on a classic supply-demand curve. These curves illustrate how the supply and the demand of a commodity react to its price. Notice that this is a qualitative chart rather than a quantitative one. This means that it shows you the general shape of the curve, but not its precise values. In a normal commodity, as the price rises, demand falls, because consumers have less of an incentive to consume. And supply grows, because producers have more of an incentive to produce. The intersection between these two curves is the point in which supply equals demand, and the market is in balance. Under normal conditions, this is the price we expect the market to reach. This kind of market tends to self-regulate. If for some reason the price is artificially pushed higher, then supply is expected to exceed demand, creating a surplus, which will push the price back down. Similarly, if for some reason the price is pulled lower, demand will exceed supply, leading to a shortage, which will push the price up again. The market is as though striving to return to equilibrium. But in the silver market, the situation is completely different. First of all, the supply curve does not slope upward as it does with most commodities. Since more than 50% of the mine supply of silver comes as a byproduct of the mining of other metals, the silver mining industry is insensitive to the price. Even if the price rises dramatically, it will not be able to increase the supply in any meaningful way. As a result, the supply curve is almost flat and hardly rises as the price grows. In addition, there are two different types of demand: industrial demand and investment demand. Industrial demand behaves similarly to a classic demand curve, in the sense that it slopes down. However, it is less steep than usual, since many of the industrial consumers need silver by hook or by crook, and would be willing to pay a lot more for it, because their products require only a tiny amount of silver, and even a dramatic increase in its price would not have a huge effect on the price of the final product. Notice that at no price point does industrial demand exceed the supply. This means that if industry was the only source of demand, we would not have a deficit in silver, and its price would remain low. There is, however, another source of demand, which does not behave like an industrial consumer. Strangely enough, investment demand tends to grow as the price rises, rather than fall. This reflects the tendency of investors to chase those assets whose price is rising. Adjusted for inflation, the price of silver is currently very low. Therefore, there is very little investment demand. But if for some reason the price would suddenly spike, investors would instantly become interested. This self-reinforcing phenomenon would continue until the price is so high that it becomes prohibitively expensive, and investors have no choice but to buy less of it. This is why the investment demand curve has the shape of a bell, and at some point it peaks and begins to fall. In order to find the joint demand curve, we need to add up the industrial and the investment demand for each and every price. The combined curve has a bell shape as well, although slightly tilted to the right. Unlike a classical curve, it intersects with the supply curve on two different locations. This means that the silver market has two different balance points. The first represents the state in which it is right now, with low investment demand, a very low price, and a market dominated by industrial demand. But there's another balance point which the market could find itself in, one with a very high price, which is dominated by investment demand. This represents a state in which silver is used as money, and industrial users consume it very sparingly because it is prohibitively expensive. And here's the interesting bit. Unlike a normal market, which is self-regulating and always aspires to return to its single balance point, the silver market has the potential to shift from one balance point to the other. Any event that upsets the apple cart and pushes the price higher can trigger a self-reinforcing process in which the market is rapidly drawn to the second balance point. As a matter of fact, I argue that the only reason this hasn't happened yet is because someone is desperately trying to prevent it from happening. I bet that the people in the banking community and in the Federal Reserve are well aware of the analysis I've shown you today and are petrified of that eventuality. If the price of silver spikes for any reason whatsoever, it will set in motion a chain of events that will effectively remonetize silver and supplant the fiat US dollar. Silver will become unaffordable for many industries, and the rest of them will have to pay for it through the nose. The banking system may collapse, and the power of the federal government will be greatly reduced, because it will no longer be able to run deficits and will be forced to balance its budget. No wonder then that very powerful people are heavily invested in trying to prevent this from happening. But here's the thing, they are fighting a losing battle. The breakout of inflation we have witnessed in recent years is pushing the prices of all commodities higher, and particularly the precious metals, gold and silver. It is becoming more and more difficult for the banks to keep the price of silver at bay. I suspect that once they lose control, you will see the price snap from one balance point to the other so quickly that it'll make your head spin. This is not something we can time with any degree of certainty, and the only thing we can do is to sit tight on our physical silver and let the laws of economics do their thing. Thank you for listening to the Silver Hermit podcast. If you like this content, please donate in the link which appears in the description below. Please subscribe to this channel and share it with your friends and family. Hit the bell icon to be notified whenever I release a new video. Remember, I'm not a licensed financial advisor. This video is intended for general informational purposes only and should not be regarded as investment advice. Before taking any investment decision, please consult with a professional financial advisor who may assess your personal investment objectives and needs.